Did you know you have springs in your feet? So certain structures like our plantar fascia and our Achilles tendon have very elastic properties, which means they can store energy as they stretch and they can release energy back into the system as they recoil. When our foot and ankle springs are working well, we're able to effectively absorb, distribute and utilize the loads that we receive from the ground, which makes our movement more efficient. This is obviously critical for performance in athletic activities like sprinting, cutting and jumping, but it's also important for day-to-day activities like walking. But if our springs aren't working well, then we'll be leaking energy in all of those activities and we'll be increasing our risk of injuries either in the springs themselves or in the other areas that have to pick up the slack. Fortunately, we can train the function of our springs with some simple plyometric exercises, and you can check out our full video on YouTube for tips on how to get started with that. Alright, so in previous videos we've talked a lot about the importance of restoring natural foot function in the sense of building up our strength, our mobility, our coordination, and all of that is a really important foundation and a great first step in any rehab or prehab process. But if you want to truly explore your natural foot function and express your potential when it comes to movements and efficient movements, especially like walking, running, jumping, sprinting, all of these things, then you'll really want to focus on training your elastic recoil. And what we're talking about there is really focusing on the connective tissues, some of the connective tissues, especially like our tendons and fascia, our plantar fascia, especially through the foot, which actually functions a bit more like a tendon. And all of these tissues have elastic properties. Our muscles do have some elastic properties as well, but especially these connective tissues like the fascia and tendons have a really good ability to store energy when they're stretched and then to release that energy back into our system as we move in that sort of recoil effect. So just to focus on the foot and ankle for today's video, you can imagine the Achilles, so you've got your calf muscle, runs into your Achilles tendon, which is the largest and strongest tendon in the body, that goes down into your heel and then joins up with your plantar fascia, which runs from the heel all the way down into your toes. So as I'm walking, running, or hopping is a really good example of this, hopping there like that, then the tendons and the fascia stretch, and you can just visualize that as they stretch. It's like they're bringing tension like there, like a spring or a rubber band, and then as that recoils, if I'm fast enough with my ground contact, then that recoil will sort of bring me back in the opposite direction. And so what that means is I'm getting almost free energy. I'm recycling that energy, which just means my calf and foot muscles don't have to do as much work. So if I wasn't getting that energy from the spring or that recoil, then I would just have to use more contraction in the calf and the foot. So that's why the elastic properties and that spring-like effect is so important for efficiency when it comes to movement. And obviously efficiency means we're able to perform better when it comes to, sports performance or any other those movements that I was talking about. But it also matters a lot in terms of injury reduction and pain resolution, or getting to the core of musculoskeletal issues. A lot of it comes down to efficiency. Of course, there can be other factors that contribute to pain, but in terms of things that we can really focus on from a movement and physical therapy sort of perspective, we want to be improving our efficiency when it comes to movement. So after we have spent, a good chunk of time, everyone will be a little bit different, but you want to be spending a good chunk of time building that foundation of strength, mobility, coordination, as we've gone through in previous videos. That's really important before you start doing a lot of these sort of exercises, which are mostly plyometric type exercises to train our elastic recoil. We want to have a good baseline of tendon strength, muscle strength, mobility through all those areas. So I just want to really stress that, because if you're watching this video and you're new to foot training or movement training in general, and you start straight into plyometric exercises, that can be a recipe for incurring an injury or some kind of pain. So definitely go back and do those other restorative exercises first. But if you've been doing that for some time and you're feeling ready to take your training to the next level, then you can start exploring these more plyometric exercises to build those springs. So the first one we will try, funnily enough, is something that you could probably have a go without doing so much of those restorative exercises, but that's because it's not actually a true plyometric, it's more of a coordination drill. So what we're doing, it's called a penguin march. Hands on your hips like this is a good just place for them. And what we're doing is standing pretty much on the tips of our toes. Doesn't have to be all the way up, but you're standing at the tips of your toes like that. You're bringing one foot up into dorsiflexion. This is hard for balance as I'm demonstrating, but you'd be doing it quicker. Up into dorsiflexion like that, and then you'd be swapping basically like that. Now you could do it on the spot, or you could sort of go forward like this. And what that is doing is building the coordination that you want to quickly move between dorsiflexion, which is that ankle movement coming up here, toes towards shin, and plantar flexion. And what that is doing is creating that quick stretch on the Achilles and the plantar fascia. So I'll keep demonstrating that. So just trialing that is a great way to build the coordination because we'll be integrating that once we get into the more plyometric movements. The next one is, which is also a good preparatory exercise, I just call like a heel hover hop, basically, or just like a heel bounce. You're hovering your heels off the ground, and then it's actually just getting used to that sort of bouncing feeling. So again, we're not leaving the ground, which is where it becomes more of a plyometric exercise. It's literally just bouncing up and down and getting used to not slamming your heels into the ground like that. So you want to avoid that impact, and you're just bouncing, 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 and staying light on your feet. And then the next thing you can focus on with this is not allowing your knees to bend like that. So this is a really common thing when we're training the foot and ankle. We actually want to reduce the amount our knees come into it, because that will essentially disrupt our efficiency and the stiffness through our ankle that we want for these plyometrics. So keeping your knees straight and just bouncing, bouncing, bouncing like that. And you could have like a little tap on the ground with the heels, but it's just not slamming down into there, and it's not going bounce, bounce, bounce like a squat. So once you've warmed up with that, even if you're ready for these other ones, you could warm up with those, or you could just use those as part of your foot and ankle strength, mobility, coordination training to build up towards these plyos, plyometric exercises. Then you can start going for some actual pogo hops, which is almost like a combination of the two, but we're leaving the ground with our feet. So start really small. And it's hard for me to talk while I'm doing these, but what you're seeing is little hops. My knees are staying straight, and as my feet are leaving the ground, they're doing that same movement that we practiced with the penguin march. So a little more demo here. So you're really hitting the ground and coming back off it. It's a short ground contact time, which really helps facilitate all of those properties, the elastic recoil that we're after. And that is what gives us that power and that efficiency. So we want to train that first double leg. You can obviously build that up to go higher and higher, so you have more air time. Generally, the higher you go, the more of that knee bend you're going to get. But what I want to show you in terms of what to avoid is this kind of knee bend, where you're actually sort of resting on the ground. Even though it's a short rest, this is not what we're after, where our knees are really coming forward and we're sort of getting more into a jump. It's really more of a bounce like that. And your knees are staying relatively stiff. If they get some movement, that's okay. So next you can go into some alternating patterns where you sort of, same movement, but you're just coming forward and back. You could go side to side. And you could also go into some alternating hops where you go from one side to the other. So again, these don't have to be really high jumps. It's just teaching that bounce and that stretch. It's called the stretch shortening cycle through the feet and the ankles. Last progression is a single leg pogo, which is very challenging to keep that short ground contact time, and is a really advanced progression, but something that you can build up to over time. So you wouldn't be exploring all of those exercises in your first session, for example, but that is an example of the progressions that you can go through over time, over sort of weeks, months, even years for some people, to build all of those properties that we're after. And that will really go a long way for improving performance, reducing injuries in things like walking, running, sprinting, jumping, but will also improve your performance and efficiency in things like walking. So really good exercises to go through. Like I said, take them slow at your own pace, listen to your body. You don't want to be rushing into these things. You might want to consider doing them, say, 3 days a week as part of your usual training where you're doing some strength and mobility work. You might incorporate these afterwards or even beforehand as part of a warm-up. But yeah, it's very important that you gradually build those up, build the amount of time that you're doing, the amount and the intensity in terms of how high you're going. And these are just a few examples of a lot of different plyometric exercises you can do. And again, those are really focusing on the foot and ankle that we went through today. You can also do a lot of other plyometric exercises that incorporate the knees and hips a little bit more too. So explore that, try and have fun with it, and we'll see you in the next video.